I'm back with Irene, who you've met earlier in this week, and we're talking now about adaptive capacity in Namibian households and villages in northern Namibia. So Irene, building on what we talked about earlier, I wonder if you could just explain what you think the levels of adaptive capacity are in these households and the communities that you're working in.
I think that the levels are a little bit low.
Okay.
If we look at like in terms of what they are able to do, just by looking at the household structure, they are mainly young people and elderly. And the young people who are able to meaningfully contribute in terms of even just like labor, they all have migrated to urban areas.
So people would talk about that almost like human capacity, if
Yes.
you like. So, so there's sort of, what you're saying is that the people who should be there who've got the energy and the youth are missing. And what about sort of ambition and agency amongst those who are there?
No, they people are really keen. They feel that
Okay.
they can do something. And you can just look at their current coping strategies. They are really trying, because if you talk about this crop production and even livestock, these are their main livelihoods. You know, they just do things to get by. But if there is any like support either from outside in terms of these are the climate risks, and we can sort of get together and do this in terms of adaptation, then people are really willing to, because even for themselves they know that things are getting difficult as the days goes.
So that's sort of what we might call a bit of sort of like social capital or maybe technical capital or whatever. Does that actually exist? So is the support and information and the resources to help them become more resilient, for want of a better word, is that actually in place, or is that a capital that's an adaptive capital that's actually missing?
It's sort of missing. If you look at these communities, they have very good social networks.
Within the community itself?
Within the community itself, even leading up to certain government structures in terms of the traditional authority, that is sort of okay, and the glue is almost there. But in terms of these communities reaching out either to NGOs or to other government services, that becomes almost, that link is almost missing.
Okay, and whose fault is that? Is the government not engaging, or does the government not have the capacity to support them, or is the community not being proactive enough?
It's both. Government doesn't really have the capacity, and they also don't engage with these communities. I have a feeling that government is always not also being proactive. If there is a drought, then they react to the drought. But they sort of don't put up long-term plans in terms of what these communities, together with government, what they can do so that they are not really impacted on by drought. If there is flooding, then they react on it, but they don't plan way in advance, and also in terms of long-term. But communities are also not really being proactive. I think the challenge is that there are no platforms really in which they can engage with government, except they can go to the traditional authority and say, no, I'm going hungry, because that they are allowed to do, and they are allowed to ask for that type of support from government. But in terms of, no, I have this, we are thinking about having this intervention so that we improve our livelihoods in terms of these risks that they are faced with, that is not there.
So it sounds like there are kind of capacities and mechanisms for what people would call reactive adaptation, which is kind of responding to a crisis as it arrives, but nothing much that is more anticipatory or forward-thinking that would then sort of make them much more resilient should something actually happen in the future. Is that, so it's still very much around coping rather than planning and foresight.
Yes.
So if you had to sort of say where the emphasis should be in interventions? Would it be in creating that sort of more longer term?
Yes. So both, so that there is proactiveness both from communities and also from government. Government has a tendency of addressing issues in terms of sectors. There is a land issue, or there is a environmental issue, or an agricultural issue. But to integrate all these sectors, so that they come up with interventions that are more mainstreamed.
Okay. So that almost sounds like calling for sort of integrated development planning that is climate resilient, or that takes climate stresses into account, I guess, along with other factors. And you're saying that's not really happening at the moment?
That is not happening. Even in terms of the structures that are there through either government policies or programs, you get like this is a committee for people who are affected by HIV. This one is a water committee. This one is a developmental committee. So if all those structures can come together and sort of have an integrated program, which is more long term. But also what is important is also to have the voices of the communities present in this.
So that's where you get back to that idea of a platform, some process of where the community's aspirations become part of the planning process, and the plans are sort of designed to enable those in the context of climate change, if you like. Okay, that's great. So thanks very much for that. Again, we see a picture there where there needs to be, I guess, some really hard thinking about how one creates this enabling environment that capacitates people to be able to respond and plan for the future, to deliver what they want out of life. Thanks, Irene.
Thank you, Mark.